44. Last Breath. Terran steeled himself for the crushing guilt at leaving Nox, but it didn't come. Instead, the heat running through his veins intensified. "Save her." "Hold on," he instructed Amelia. As soon as his stride broke the threshold of the tent, he pushed them skyward. It took no more than a glance to see the entire camp had prepared for his exit, and a barrage of bolt fire filled the air. The notoriously inaccurate weapons thankfully tracked a split second too late, leaving only a couple energy pulses zipping past them. He landed behind the first line of attackers on one of the large hovercraft decks. Without engaging the soldiers, he quickly angled himself towards the barricade itself. The power pulsing through him flickered. "Hang on, Nox. I almost have her clear." The hum of strength stabilized. He launched them back into the air before the startled soldiers on the craft could adjust. The barricade grew large as they dropped through the air and into its mass of tangled tree limbs and branches. He curled his body around Amelia as they crashed through the surface brush and deep into its knotted heart. Terran clung to the wavering strength, pulling everything he could to fortify them. Amelia gripped to his neck as branches whipped. Momentum alone broke them through several layers of thick limbs before Terran landed flat-backed on a thick trunk, Amelia atop his chest. The air pushed from his lungs, and they both lay stunned. Debris rained down through thin beams of light. Dust motes spun through the air. Terran coughed and released his hold on Amelia. She groaned and rolled free. They were wedged in a small hollow, the close-pressed air smelling of fur. Sputtered heat ran down his spine, mending fractures. He took a slow breath, testing his ribs. Bruised, but whole. With a muted groan, he pushed himself from the trunk, relieved to find clay beneath his feet. No further to fall. If they could find their way through these logs, the caravan awaited. He ducked to keep from hitting his head, peering through the gloom for a way forward. Amelia sat on the trunk, making careful movements. "You okay?" She glanced up at him with red-rimmed eyes and a haunted expression. "Em? Is Nox?" He searched for any sign of the sky's gift within him. A cool emptiness replaced the borrowed power. No heat burned in his veins, no warmth gathered in his core. The carved-out feeling made him want to shrivel up and curl into a ball. "He's gone." Amelia's blank stare came into focus, and she pulled in a long, ragged breath. The movement made her flinch. She held her left arm. The shoulder showcased an unnatural depression. "Did that happen as we fell?" A sour taste filled his mouth at the thought. She puffed her cheeks, detached but lucid. "A long pole caught me off a parry," she explained. He had seen the fight, but had missed her taking a hit. The sounds of hovercraft moving and orders being yelled cut into their hideaway. They were not clear yet. Light peeking through the branches marked the path forward. They would need to crawl and squeeze their way through the dense tangle of wood. Amelia wouldn't be able to manage it while clinging to her injured arm. "We need to set your shoulder." She grimaced, but didn't argue. The sounds of blaster bolts spattering against the barricade punctuated the need for them to move quickly. Resetting joints was something Terran had done on Nox and himself numerous times. Healing only really took hold when a joint was in its proper orientation. He moved to grip her arm, but hesitated. This was going to hurt. "Ready? Now, Terran." Her voice was firm, despite the fact she wouldn't meet his eyes. He swallowed back his hesitation and gripped her wrist and shoulder to create the proper leverage. With practiced movements, he brought her wrist around and flared her elbow. The joint popped back into place. She bit back a cry. "Done," he said, pulling free his belt and securing the injured arm to her side. Voices and cracking branches sounded from the Tumultian side of the barricade. "Can you move?" She nodded and slid off the trunk. Terran took the lead as they climbed through the tangled and broken limbs of the crisscrossed trees. Luckily, their slow progress also meant slowed pursuit. They also had the benefit of having light to guide them towards the outer edge. Tumultian curses and snapping branches confirmed that climbing down into the dark center of the barricade was proving difficult. They broke free into the pale, overcast light of a temperate afternoon. Terran heaved in a full breath, grateful for clear air. His eyes adjusted to see the train of caravan cars moving off. No! He shrunk back, Emilia next to him, and hunkered down into the cover of loose branches. A familiar whine caught his attention, followed by the snap of bolt throwers sending potshots off the top of the barricade. One of the mercurial scout craft zipped into view, patrolling the barricade edge and dodging the Timoshian barrage. Thank the sky! We're going to have to flag him down, he said, pulling back to Emilia. Can I carry her without the sky's strength? He knew to his core he would never be fast enough. I can run, Emilia said. The ashy pallor was gone from her cheeks, and her jaw set with determination. He held out his hand to her, and she took it. They crept to the cover of a large stump tipped the wrong way up. Terran waited for the craft to head back in their direction and then pulled Emilia forward, and they ran. Shouts sounded, and blue bolts of energy hit the ground around them. The craft caught sight of them, and it whined as it shot their direction. Charles, Venier's acolyte, drove. He was gesturing frantically behind him to the north end of the barricade. A liquefaction was beginning to roil and churn as it transformed to liquid earth, opening the tunnel. Emilia and Terran jumped into the back of the craft before Charles came to a complete stop. Bolts spattered around them. Go! Terran shouted. Is there anyone else? Charles asked. Terran shook his head as his chest heaved from exertion. Emilia lay flat next to him, staring at the sky, tears streaming down her cheeks. Charles made straight for the caravan. A line of Timoshian hovercraft were coming up through the tunnel, but they made no move to pursue, instead spreading out in a line along the barricade in an impressive show. And just like that, the Mercurial had a new border. Hours later, there were still no signs of pursuit, but Terran kept the caravan moving and drivers organized for a non-stop trip. He couldn't afford to stop before they were back in contact with the Order and safely within the mountains. He sat in the pilot car with Charles as he recorded an official report. The acolyte took the news of Venier's capture and death with stoic resolve, insisting on hearing the whole story from Terran. When Terran finished, Charles's young face set in a grim expression as he stared out over the view screen. It doesn't make sense. Overseers are invulnerable. How can they all be dead? Terran spun his seat to face the young man. His body ached, but he had escaped any serious injury thanks to Nox's power. The Timoshians are wielding new tech, bolt throwers that can stop an overseer even with their gift flared, and powered manacles that blocked access to the sky. Charles glanced in his direction. So they disabled them, but they could still be alive? They didn't leave anything to chance. They were all beheaded. The young man's eyes went wide, blanching. How did you escape? Terran sighed. This was the crux of it. How to explain that which he didn't understand himself. I know you chose Miss Emilia and laid down your oaths. You have no power. The quickly whispered words hit with force. Terran raised an eyebrow at the boy. Did Venier know? The young man shook his head. I think she was blinded by hope. She wanted you free with your strength intact. It never occurred to her when you woke that you had made a different choice. But you knew. The kid blushed, the color blending through his freckles. Anyone watching can see how much you love her. That hasn't changed. Terran let out a snort. I didn't know I was so transparent. He cocked his head and considered the acolyte. Did you tell your matron? A flicker of guilt crossed Charles's face, and he gripped the controls tighter. I didn't think it was important. She had 3 other overseers with her. The confession spilled from Charles with all the self-loathing of someone ready to take on full responsibility for a tragic turn. She learned the truth regardless, Terran assured. The overseers were held back, but I remained at her side. Not that it spared her in the end. A bit of color returned to Charles's pale complexion. But you made it out and she didn't? The question could be an accusation from other lips, but from the boy Terran could see only a desperate need to understand. he let out a slow breath, staring out the window. Nox was there. Nox? As in disavowed Nox? I thought he was dead. The questions smacked at the worn places in Taran's own mind. The overarching question of how haunted him. He rubbed at his jaw, trimmed beard still caked in grime. He should have been. We thought he was. I saw him swallowed by the earth. And yet, the Tumulcians had him, sky knows how. His voice broke, trying to push past the memory of Nox's maimed body. Cheryl's didn't press, and they continued in silence. Finally, Taran took a breath and let the full story spill from him. I don't understand any of it. This is not what the Order teaches. The power of the sky doesn't work in this way, he finished. And now? Cheryl asked. Do you have power again? Taran shook his head. When Nox died, it left. Cheryl piloted the caravan along the road past a copse of silver-trunked aspens. Their leaves spanned vibrant greens to a startling yellow, signaling the change of season. Pardon my forwardness, Overseer, but I don't think you should tell any of this to elevated Darius. Taran frowned. The oaths binding him to Darius had fallen away with his primary oath to the Order, but to hear the cautionary words from a sworn acolyte hit a discordant note. Venye was behind the unrest in the Order, wasn't she? Cheryl's mouth pinched, jaw setting as he made a decision. It's not what they say. There were others leveraging the chaos for position. She only wanted to stop Elevated Darius from damaging the Order. Elevated Darius is a self-inflated pompous arse, but his oaths are to the Mercurial. A tight shrug matched a guarded expression. I only know what Matram Venye told me. She was not trying to destabilize the Order, but to protect its overseers and acumen. Did she make a deal with the Tumulcians? Taran asked. Shock jolted the acolyte. No, of course not. The commander referenced a broken deal with the Mercurial. I never heard her talk about the Tumulcians at all. If there was a deal, it came from someone else in the Order. Everything Matram Venye did was to bolster those who served. Looking stricken, he asked, Do you think the Order, the Conclave, will believe she turned traitor? It could be spun that way when we present our report. Cheryl gave a tight nod. Whoever is responsible will want my Matram to take the fall. Taran nodded, but privately harbored skepticism. The elder, while outwardly compassionate, had also purposefully driven him into fracturing for her own benefit. Whatever game these elders were playing in the capital needed to come to an end before more overseers were lost. And Cheryl's could be a helpful ally in unraveling all of this. We will have to walk the halls with our eyes open. As Taran hoped, Cheryl welcomed the invitation. I agree, Overseer. What now? Do you know who she was working with? No, she kept me from most of her dealings. Do you know anyone who would want weapons, technology that could control overseers? Like the ones that killed Connor and the others? Taran nodded. Cheryl went pale, and Taran leaned forward and keyed in a sequence, setting the convoy on autopilot. The boy leaned back in his seat with a breath. I swear I don't know. Whoever orders such a creation, though, will pay. Careful with vows, Taran admonished. The acolyte bowed his head with a slight nod. The young man's reaction highlighted one thing. They were going to need to have a rehearsed story by the time they returned to the capital. Some color returned to Charles's face, and he seemed to brighten. You're not going to let them get away with this, are you? Taran's jaw tightened, and he met the boy's eye. I don't want to play politics. I want to protect the Mercurial. Can I count on your help? Yes, Overseer. You know that title is long gone. Cheryl shrugged with an impish look. But the Order doesn't.